TEDx community, I introduce you to my deep inside secret. My name is Yuri, and I'm here to talk about my somewhat miserable but hopeful life story. A few months ago, I lived like a complete underachiever. I had no plans, no motivations, and spent most of my time staring at my phone or sleeping. It was a slump, and I felt meaningless and useless. Now I have somewhat specific and vague goals, and it's living a life with tasks to overcome, which is where I gain joy from. There was no dramatic turning point. What changed my life completely was something much simpler: self-management. If someone asked me what self-management means to me, I will define it as a promise between my present self and my future self. By definition, self-management is the ability to regulate something under one's control and remaining consistent with it. Back in Korea, I was a high-achieving student. I consistently earned top scores and won competitions. However, the academic system in Korea was quite different from international and American school systems. My schedules were controlled by academies where everything was structured for me, as if I was living in a bubble. But after moving to China, the structure vanished. At first, I managed well, but before long, I began procrastinating and losing control of my life. Without strict systems surrounding me, my discipline easily left. I think many of us here would have experienced opening our phone for 5 minutes, only to realize on our headsets, surrounded by constant dopamine from platforms like TikTok and Instagram, I could no longer focus even for an hour. Looking back, I was not lazy, but I had simply lost control of my own life. This connects a psychological concept called delay discounting, which explains how people tend to prefer smaller but immediate rewards over larger but delayed rewards. For example, many people would rather prefer to get $10 now rather than $15 years later. Even though the reward in the future is objectively greater, people often tend to make those choices. This is exactly what happens in our daily lives. We just scrolling over studying, comfort over effort, and present happiness over future success. In doing so, we break the promise that we have made to our future self. However, self-management is not limited only to academics. It connects to diverse aspects of our lives, such as controlling emotions, maintaining good habits, or maybe even regulating your own screen time. In many situations, however, failure to manage priorities comes from lack of self-management, which leads to great failure of the event. The most important realization I had was this: self-management and discipline is not simply about one's willpower, but it is rather also connected to one's environment. I didn't become so motivated all of a sudden. Instead, I made smaller but gradual changes. I reduced the distractions surrounding me, and my environment is easy to focus. This idea is supported by research and implementation intentions, which suggests that people are more likely to focus better and achieve goals with strict restrictions and if-then plans. For example, if I finish dinner, I will study math for 30 minutes. Small systems like this makes consistency easier. However, soon I realized the deeper issue was about how I treated myself. I used to expect dramatic expectations and changes in a very short period of time. I wanted to fix everything at once, and when I failed, I became very disappointed in myself. I constantly compared my progress to others, which only weakened my motivation further. The cycle of unrealistically high dreams, failure to do so, self-criticism, and loss of motivation became deeply embedded to my own life. Through this experience, I learned very important one thing. Self-management is not just about pushing oneself to be perfect. It is rather about building a sustainable system where progress remains realistic even if it's slow. It is about adjusting your expectations and how you keep small promises to yourself. So, instead of trying to change everything overnight, I learned to focus on smaller but controllable actions that I can consistently maintain. And through these experiences, I regained control of my life. So, for those of you who may feel trapped between present comfort and future goals, I want to leave you with this thought. Our future is not determined by one dramatic moment of motivation. It is shaped by how one and individuals can to keep small promises to themselves every day. Thank you.